Come on, Sam. All right, what's going on there, fellas? What you just watched there was some of my training from earlier today. We are on the second to last week of this training cycle. We're pulling back on some of the accessories to try to stay reasonably fresh. So I came in, I did my overhead presses from low pins, just working on those to take away that stretch reflex at the bottom. Nothing too crazy, worked up to a top set of 275 for 4. A little shy of what I would have liked. But I'm pretty fried. Not going to worry about that too much. Those low pin presses are working pretty well for me. Did some back offs. Then normally I would have my neutral grip chin ups. Got heavy pulls tomorrow. So I decided to dial back on those, and I just did my warm up set. So I did a set with body weight, a set with 25, and a set with 45, just for some warm up reps and some active recovery. Kind of move my shoulder girdle through that range of motion. But not do anything that's going to meaningfully tax my lats that might throw me off a little bit tomorrow. And then, because I was reasonably fresh from not doing work sets on the neutral chins, I decided I would push my dips a bit, leading to that set you just watched where I worked up to 6 plates, so 270 for a double. I kind of planned on 4 or 5 coming into this session, but my pecs are pretty fried from my incline work on Monday. So I kind of took what was there. It's the most I've ever dipped, so I'll take it. Definitely think I got more there on a good day when the pecs aren't fried. So I'll probably at some point be capitalizing on that. You'll see some more heavy dips from me. But kind of cool to secure the heaviest dip I've done. I think I'll probably be good for about 7 plates fresh. So body weight plus 315. I think that's about within the upper end of my capabilities right now. So I'll probably work on something like that in the next couple of weeks when I'm a little bit fresher. Tomorrow we've got technique squats, heavy deadlift for a single, no back off volume because we are truly just getting in heavy touches, moving on. Going to hammer some accessories. Then we're going to be resting up for heavy squats and deadlifts next week. So pretty exciting. That's kind of where I'm at with my training. We'll get into the next section in a moment. So I've been racking my brain for what I should do as like maybe the hot take section, maybe for the question section. And we're running low on questions. So if you guys have something you want me to touch on in one of these videos where we do kind of this multifaceted format where we do some update from my training, something I feel that's worth kind of putting on here, i.e. today's dips, some kind of maybe hot take. If you got a controversial opinion that you're curious what I think, you're trying to get that coveted hot take medal. Make sure it's actually controversial though. Nobody likes when you play it safe and you attach a million caveats. Make it spicy. I won't bully you. I'll give you guys, I'll extend the olive branch, and I will often keep in mind that you might be a little bit inflammatory with the phrasing. And that might not be your true opinion, but you're looking for a true spicy take. I appreciate that. I think it increases the entertainment value of the video. I don't think it reflects badly on you. So if you guys want to put some real spicy ones in there, I will happily read them. Or if you've got any questions you want covered in one of these, let's throw them in the comments section of each one of these rather than doing the community posts. So if you guys got questions, you guys got hot takes, put them down below. I will read them. If I feel like there's something that are going to provide good entertainment value and good informational value, I will include them in the next one. Or if you have a topic, right? Maybe it's not a question. Maybe it's, hey, Sam, can you give me 5 of your favorite supplemental movements for the bench press? Sam, can you give me some protocols I should be looking at to do outside the gym to maximize my inside the gym performance? Like if you can have 5 parts of your outside the gym checklist, what would they be? Now that I say that, that's a pretty good one. So maybe I'll do that at some point. But if you guys have topics for these, I'm all ears. I always read the comments, even if I don't get back to them all. Having a hard time keeping up with my social medias nowadays because I don't want to spend too long on my computer past what I'm already doing for work. But we're going to get into the hot take and the question now. All right, so I opened up my computer to go find some hot takes. Go find some questions for the latter part of this video, but my timer went off, so I have to do a little bit of meal prepping. I can't fall behind schedule, so you guys are going to have to overlook me cooking while we do this. But I thought about it for a second. I was like, hey, that was a damn good idea. That's a good one by me. Maybe I should talk about if you're going to join the logbook gang, what are the parts of our logbook that we should be logging outside just our training. Because I talked about this on Bromley's podcast, but I got this idea in my head that if I have a notebook, and in my notebook, I log the things that I think are really moving the ball. I log the things that I think are really making a difference in making me move towards being a stronger person, right? And I track all of these things, all hypothetically, simple, but rather difficult. All I have to do is for the next 10 years, make most of the pages of that notebook look like what I assume the pages of a high-level strength athlete's notebook would look like. So we're gonna go through the things that I track in there. We're gonna leave some out because I get really neurotic with it. I'm sure you guys have noticed that I'm pretty obsessive about training stuff, and there's some stuff in there that I don't even feel is worth mentioning because I think it'll just add more and more complexity, and the more complexity is, the less likely people are to adhere to it long term. But we're gonna talk about, let's say you wanna join the logbook gang. What are we looking to include in that logbook, and try to make it look, not just make it look, do the thing, so that way you're not lying to your logbook, but what do we want to see in that makes us think, okay, well, I've executed the day of a high-level strength athlete. Now I have to do that over and over and over for a long time, and gradually I will become a high-level strength athlete. So the first section that we're looking at there is probably the most obvious one, and that's going to be the training. We want to log our numerical progression, whether we're at a point in our lifting where we can reliably get better from week to week. So we're looking at last week's numbers to make sure that we're making progression. We have a baseline of what we think we need to beat, or whether we're looking at the corresponding week of the last time we were at this point in our training cycle. So maybe we're comparing this week to last week, or maybe we're comparing this week, let's say it's week 3, to last training cycle's week 3, to make sure that we're ahead by a little bit of where we were in that loading range of the last one. Now, what is going to be comprising that training section? That's something that we've got a billion videos here on this channel that are about. And I plan to make many more. If you have specific questions of what probably we should be doing on any given day to chase any given goal, that's too big of a topic to handle in this one. You could put it down below, and maybe that's what we can get into in some of the next ones of these videos. But first and foremost, we have our training. Now, we can also use the notebook in our training section to log our resistance training, but we can also use it as a tool to try to be more active in our learning process and speed up our technical progression, because we have two kind of things that we're kind of progress side by side. We have our strength progression, which is like more the contractile property of our muscles, and we have our technical progression. Now, I kind of subscribe to the American model of this, which is I expect the beginner to have beginner level strength and beginner level form. And as they get stronger, I expect their form to progress alongside that. And I only view this as a big problem when these things are kind of out of sync. If someone is very contractilely, like let's say they're advanced level strength and they have intermediate level form, that's where we might really need to make an intervention. But for the most part, I expect people to follow these two things progressing in tandem. And if you identify that your technique needs to progress faster, and there's no such thing as your technique progressing too quick, we can try to use our notebook to be more active in our learning process, which is before the session, write down on each motion what your technical focus is going to be. Write down some notes about what cues helped you chase that technical goal. Be active in thinking about how we're moving our technique forward. Don't just think of it as numbers in a logbook. Also write down the subjective things that you're working on in your form, because we're working on the strength, and those are the numbers in the book, but we're also working on the technique, and those are the words in the book. And we're going over our physical training first, because debatably that's the most important. I think the question of, which one's the most important? The training, the sleep, or the nutrition? It's a silly question, because we need to try to do all of these things to the best of our ability. And if we do any one of them well and the other ones very badly, our results are going to be trash. So while that's a kind of interesting question, I don't think it's the most useful thought experiment in the world. But we're going to start with physical training, because if you're going to make an argument, I think that that's probably the most important one. If our goals are performance oriented, the training is first and foremost. If we're really mailing in our training, even with good sleep and a good diet, we're not going to make it that far on extremely low effort or really shitty training, right? So next, this might be a small part of your program. This might be a big part of your program. You also notice how I'm adding zero seasoning to this as standard. The next thing that you might want to log in your physical training section of your notebook, which the top third of the notebook is my physical training, is your conditioning. Depending on your goals, this might be something that you put a lot of effort into tracking your metrics and monitoring your heart rate and how far did I make it in this distance on the row, or in this time on the rower, on the ski erg, on the elliptical, on the treadmill. We might be putting a lot of thought into tracking these things and progressing them over time. It might just be something that as long as you worked hard, you're getting your goal. So the amount of conditioning work that we're doing and what comprises that conditioning work, again, that's something that we could talk about in future videos, but that's another thing that would fall handily into this physical training section of your logbook. And then the last thing that would go in this physical training section of your logbook is going to be your mobility work. Now, I try to take a very minimalist approach with mobility work because the more complex the mobility routine, generally the less long-term adherence we see. So it's really, we've got this idea that, okay, well, strength training through a full range of motion is very effective for our mobility. And that should be our first and foremost means of intervening with a mobility deficit. But there's only so much resistance training we can do. And sometimes you're going to be left at a bit of a deficit because you're like, well, shit, I can't do any more full range squatting work. But my mobility is still lacking a little bit. I perceive that to be a deficit. So then that's why I do my daily third world squats for 5 total minutes, and that's a checkbox I have in my thing. So I kind of do it to the bare minimum. Maybe I'll do a little extra, but I won't include that in my notebook as a mandatory box to check every day. But I'll find a few key things that when I do this, my squatting goes better. A few key things that if I do this, my overhead positions are better, and I make sure I do those every day. And I'd rather have a couple of things that I do really consistently than have a very complex variety of things that I do inconsistently. But I would say that's the third kind of portion of my physical training sections. Number 1, we have our resistance training. Number 2, we have our conditioning. And number 3, we have our mobility. And notes can be taken on all these things to kind of talk about more subjective qualities that we're working on rather than just numerical qualities. Now, we're going to try to speed through the rest because I am done cooking and I have to portion this out and eat it. So next we have kind of the nutrition segment, and I break the nutrition segment into 3 kind of different parts. The first is going to be traditionally what we think of when we think of nutrition, which is what food did we eat? We identify, okay, I should probably be eating 3 feeding windows a day. Maybe it starts to get impractical to hit your macros across 3 feeding windows. It's just the portions are too big. The amount of protein is too big. We move to 4 feeding windows, which I find most people will need to move to 4. If we're getting bigger or we're training our ability to eat more and more food, we might eventually need to move to 5. So if you're someone who's struggling, you've got this amount of food that you know you should be eating, and you're really struggling to get it down, meal frequency is your best friend. So we select a number of feeding windows. We write down what we eat for meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, meal 4, and then we can make adjustments from day to day. We can observe what doesn't digest well for us. And there's kind of 2 lenses we can track our food through. So it's just a little food log, right? And that way you know, today's training went terribly. Let me look at yesterday's training log. Let me look at the training log before my notebook from the day before or the day before that. Man, my nutrition log looks pretty subpar. That's why I performed bad. There's nothing to read into here from a programming perspective. I need to do better from a dietary perspective. That's why I like having all these things in one place. So we could kind of look at this from 2 lenses. We could take a look at this from more of a macros-centric lens, and we could track our daily meal macros and our sum macros for the day. If that's something that you're more comfortable with, or we can just do food quantities, kind of gauge a general good amount of meat with each meal, adjust the quantity up and down where we're not actually working in grams of protein. We're working in, let's say, ounces of meat. We're working in total, like grams of rice rather than grams of carbs. And we bring that up when we're trying to gain weight. We bring that down when we're trying to lose weight. And we don't necessarily need to be super hung up on what exactly the macros are if we're taking the more food quantity centric approach. Now, when we're picking our initial food quantities, we should kind of have a rough estimate of the macros, but we don't always need to stay exact on top of those if what we're doing is we're measuring our food by weight and we're making our adjustments that way. I know a couple of bodybuilders that they don't actually know the macros, they just know the exact food quantities, and they find that works quite well for them. So we have our foods, we log them, we can kind of see what's digesting well, we can look at it, and some glaring things might pop up like, oh shit, I'm not eating vegetables. If I'm imagining this notebook of a high-level strength athlete, they're probably eating some vegetables. They're probably eating some fruit. They're spacing their meals through the day. I would expect them to have a little bit higher meal frequency. So again, we can take this more zoomed out view as if someone else handed this notebook to me and they were a high-level strength athlete. Before I opened it, what would I expect the training section to look like? What would I expect the conditioning, the mobility? What would I expect that to look like? And I'm going to try to make mine look as close to like that as I can, as often as I can. Again, same thing. I'm going to build into it. Just like you can't jump into Ronnie Coleman's training routine with Ronnie Coleman's weight,
athlete. It's something that was progressed to over time. The same kind of idea applies to a diet. Just like you can't jump into his training, you can't jump into his diet. It was something that was progressed over a long time. The ability to eat and digest and assimilate these big quantities of food is something that was gradually built up, right? Like I eat about 5,000 calories a day right now, clean, which is a ridiculous amount of food, and I don't enjoy it at all, but there's not a chance I could have done this 4 years ago. It's something that was gradually progressed over time. So we're not going to jump straight into the nutrition section of our high-level athlete, but we're going to work towards it. The next part is tracking water intake, whether you track it in milliliters, liters, gallons. No, you don't even have to have any of those. You could say the number of times you go through your water bottle. If you got a water bottle about this big, you say, I feel pretty good when I drink this 4 times. Just say water and then little hash marks till you get out to 4. And that's just a box you're supposed to check every day. And you're going to miss it on some days, but most days we want to be checking that. And we could say, okay, well, most days my training section looks nice, my food section looks nice, and most days I'm coming shy of that 4 hash marks that I know I feel and perform better when I reach. That's my area for improvement. And it kind of lets you zoom out a little bit and let be less neurotic, because you're like, okay, well, all I have to do is make this page look right. And that's the part of the page that I need to work on. So the next part would be water. I like having a relatively consistent water intake. You could say, oh, the number of calories you burn per day, let's say it's 3,000. That number of milliliters, that's an okay equation. There's nothing magical about it. There's not a huge amount of literature behind it, but I do like that it accounts for general activity levels. The higher the general activity levels, the higher the number of calories burned, probably the higher the water intake needs to be. It's an okay ballpark, but you might just find what works for you. However you measure that, whether that be in gallon jugs that you bring to class, whether that be your water bottle that you just fill up and go through at work, whatever it be, we kind of track that and we kind of have that on the piece of paper, because that's going to make our training more consistent, which is then going to in turn make us stronger. Yeah, maybe the water isn't directly building muscle, but it's predicating things that do kind of help with building muscle. And then the last section of the nutrition that I was going to mention is this is actually where I track my NEAT, which is just your kind of step count. Whether you write down based on what your phone says at the end of the day, how many steps you took. Just the process of writing it down keeps you accountable, and eventually you're going to start to get embarrassed writing down 3K every day. And I just kind of track that as part of my nutrition because I find it so critical to my digestion and to my appetite to take steps. I kind of subscribe to the stand. When I can, I take a 10-minute walk after each meal, and that's how I get my step count up. And I almost track that as part of my general diet. I don't even view that as part of my physical training because I don't think taking steps counts as cardio. I think it's just a kind of a requisite part of being a healthy person to reach this minimum level of activity. I don't even view that as exercise. I think it's in the name, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So I almost track that as part of my nutrition, as goofy as that is, because it ties in so directly to my appetite. That's kind of how I view it. And I'll usually just have a little box, and it says at the top it says walks, and next to each meal there's a walk, right? And maybe sometimes I don't get that walk in right after the meal, depending on what's going on in the world. Maybe I take it later in the day, but I try to take as many walks as I have meals. And that kind of keeps me feeling good. It keeps me in reasonable kind of shape in terms of my general capacity for moving through the day. It keeps my appetite good. It keeps my digestion a good bit better. So that's kind of the third thing I include in the nutrition section. And then I'm sure you've guessed it, kind of the third section includes sleep, but it's not just sleep. And I actually just use this for general stuff that I should be doing. When I was in school, I would have homework assignments in this section, things that are also going to keep me up and interfere with my sleep. I kind of include in this general, it's almost like a to-do list for the day where I also like, okay, well, I've got my sleep supplements, I've got a bedtime, I've got a wake up time. I track those things that are going to contribute to my good sleep. Anything else that I observe to help predict my sleep, I kind of put a little box, whether that be like a sleeping mask, whether that be an air conditioning unit or a fan. I kind of got these general ideas for sleep. But the big things is tracking kind of wake up time and a bedtime. Again, just so we can look back and make sure these things look good. But I also like to include things that I know I should get done. If I don't get them done, they stress me out and they mess up my sleep. And I just kind of use it as a general productivity thing where I've got a certain amount of coaching that I need to do. There's a certain number of voice messages I need to send out. There's a video every couple of days in the notebook, right? Same thing if you're in school, same thing if you have a job, same thing about tasks around the house. Kirsten's going to beat my ass because I included in the background the fact that she has not done dishes. And those are all hers, not mine. Just putting it out there. She's going to beat my ass for that. So, but that is something that you might include in this section of your notebook. Yeah, so I would say that's kind of how I lay it out. If you wanted to join the notebook gang, thank you guys for watching. I got to go eat some beef, rice, and broccoli slaw as per standard. And then I've got blueberries and orange juice. The orange juice is just to run up extra calories right now because I'm eating a lot.